morning. We continue with Hilchot Shabbat. This is our 8th session of Hilchot Shabbat, and today we're going to talk about the rest of the things that one can or cannot do on Friday before Shabbat. So we're at chapter 251 in shulhan-arukh, 252 in shulhan-arukh. The shulhan-arukh says that one should not שלא לעשות מלאכה בערב שבת מן המנחה ולמעלה. That's on 251.1. העושים מלאכה בערב שבת מן המנחה ולמעלה אינו רואה סימן ברכה. That if one works on Friday after the time of mincha, which is a little bit after midday, when you calculate from sunset from sunrise to sunset, this melacha will not be blessed, it will not be successful. But already the Gemara says about prakmati ashare, meaning this we're not talking about commerce, opening a store, or being in the office, or anything like that, school teachers, but rather about craftsmanship, and that is proven by the next halacha that says mutar letaken kelav uvgadav kol hayom letzorach Shabbat. One can fix or mend his garments all day in preparation for Shabbat. So from that we see that the melacha that we're talking about was more of a menial work and craftsmanship, such as carpentry, construction, working in the fields, mending clothes, etc. And anything that we do for Shabbat is allowed. And obviously, since the pace of society has changed, especially in places where you have a five-day work week, one has to work Shabbat evening, but Friday afternoon until a certain hour. So this is not really a concern. If one has the ability to not work at all, beautiful, but then you should dedicate that time to prepare for Shabbat at home, either physically or spiritually. Now, the next chapter is interesting. It's in shulhan-arukh, chapter 252, reads as follows: "Mutar להתחיל במלאכה בערב שבת, סמוך לחשיכה, אף על פי שאינו יכול לגומרה מבעוד יום." One is allowed to start work on Friday, even if it's almost sunset, and before candlelighting, as long as it starts before candlelighting. Even though he cannot finish that task before Shabbat starts, but it continues automatically on Shabbat. The examples that Shulchan-arukh gives, following the footsteps of the Mishnah, it speaks about soaking the dye or elements or herbs that were used to prepare ink and dye to dye clothes. Those were soaked in water, and the process would start. So as long as you did it started before Shabbat, it's okay. Or to soak wool in dye, same thing. Now, another halakha that is mentioned in the Mishnah and is brought here in the Shulchan-arukh, and which is crucial to the understanding of what is allowed to do Erev Shabbat, is mutar liftuach mayim lagina v'hem nimshachim v'olchim b'chol Shabbat. One is allowed to release water that are going to water the garden on Shabbat. The language of the Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat is putkin mayim lagina, and the term is not clear. Most commentators understand that ptikat mayim is to open a way for the water, or a canal for the irrigation to start. So as long as it's done automatically before Shabbat, then you could let it continue on Shabbat. You don't have to stop it before Shabbat. Another possibility is that this really functions like a timer, and that they used to build mini dams, and before Shabbat you would remove one stone from the dam, one little stone, and that was timed that on the next day the irrigation would start midday, letting the water slowly trickle and push the stone. That could have been the first irrigation system by dripping that later on, Israel developed later in the 20th century, netafim, etc., that is now used worldwide. In any case, whether it is or not the understanding of potkin mayim lagina, whether it was done just opening a faucet, they didn't have a faucet, but letting the water stream through the canal into the garden, or making it a timed operation, there's really no difference. It's just that at the time of the Mishnah, the possibility of creating a timer was not very common. The question today is whether people could use timers on Shabbat or not. There's a famous ruling by Rabbi Moshe Feinstein who's against it, and most probably because at the time of the ruling, it was not very common. People didn't use timers on a regular basis. In Israel, in my household when I was growing up in the 60s, late 60s and the 70s, every household had a timer connected to the main control box to control the lights of the house. When I came to America, I was surprised that people did not have it, but now it's done either with a physical timer or a something that's controlled through your computer or an app. So there's no question that based on this ruling of the Gemara, something that started before Shabbat and continued on Shabbat, or is done with a timer, should not be a problem. It's extremely important, I believe, that when you leave a hot plate or a blech, as some people call it, or plata in Hebrew, when you leave it on before Shabbat, to set a timer, to let it turn off on after the night meal and remain off during the night. There were several tragic incidents. I think at least two that I know of, fires that started because of a hot plate, cable that burned through the house, and we don't need that. Then that could be easily prevented by using a timer. So the hot plate is on only when you're awake, and if God forbid something happens, you could be in control of the situation. Speaking of that, until we get to the laws of fire on Shabbat, I will just say, if there is any situation where with fire not under control on Shabbat, first you put it out, then you call 911. Even it's a napkin that caught fire from the Shabbat candles on the table, pour water on it right away. Don't try to put it out in any other way. I'm saying that because there were cases. There was this case in Monsey where a mattress caught fire, and the mattress of a child, and the father, instead of putting it out, decided to take it out of the house to let it burn outside. So he thought it would be, he's bypassing the prohibition of putting out fire on Shabbat. But as he dragged it down the stairs, he basically fed it with more oxygen. Running through the stairs with a burning mattress, he fed it with more oxygen, and really put himself and the whole household at risk. So please don't do that to anyone you know. Any slight concern about fire on Shabbat, you put it out, then you call 911, or you call the Mechabe Esh. I see that we have people from Israel here. So that is regarding the hot plate. Another important issue that goes around timers, that those who oppose timers will say, but okay, if you use timers, you can use for anything. You're going to use it. You're going to use the TV or other appliances or machines by timer. Are you going to make coffee with the timer? Are you going to bake with the timer? The answer is yes. There's really not a problem with all these things. It's not a halachic problem as much as it is a conceptual problem. The problem of how do we define the character of Shabbat? What is Shabbat for us? So I would say, let's speak, for example, about TV or turning another. Let's say that we're not even talking now about voice-activated devices. That will be a separate discussion. So let's talk about TV. You turn on the TV with a timer at a certain point to watch a game. I know that people want sometimes to watch games that go on Shabbat. I personally would not have liked that, but I'm not the yardstick for that, because I don't think I have watched television in the last 3 or 4 years. maybe you're there, a clip on YouTube, but not television on a regular basis, and I don't like to watch games that are on a timed schedule, and if I don't see it, I'll miss it. So, but for some people, that is their Oneg Shabbat. However, one must consider whether this is going to be a permanent thing. Is this going to be your Shabbat celebration? Every Shabbat, gather around the TV and watch the game? That is probably not beneficial for the well-being of the family, because this activity, though people sit together and they eat together and they're happy, in a way, each one is in own bubble. There's no direct communication between them, and just try to cross the TV, between the people on the TV when they're watching. So technically, it's okay. Technically, one could use a timer to turn anything on Shabbat, but that question of how we define the balance of Shabbat should be really taken into account. Another thing that bothers people, and is much more common than turning on a TV with a timer, is making coffee with a timer. And I've been in synagogues where there were major fights over the issue of preparing coffee with the coffee machine on Shabbat on a timer. In one case, the rabbi said it's okay, and people from the synagogue sent an email, called at the time, called or wrote to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef in Israel. He said it's forbidden. Then the rabbi asked himself, he asked Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, and he says it's permitted. It was not clear whether it's mutar or asul. The answer is very simple. You put it on a timer, there's not a problem at all. The problem that people bring up is mehzekim vashel. It seems as if you're cooking on Shabbat. And the answer to that is no, it does not, because now timers are ubiquitous. Everybody uses them. Everybody knows that you did not use it on Shabbat. Rabbi Abadi, Rabbi Yitzhak Abadi of Lakewood, goes even further. He says you could use, as the question that I asked him personally, if you have something already in the oven or in the, or let's say in the bread machine or something like that, and you put it on the timer, you can get up in the morning and get your fresh buns and fresh coffee. It will be on Shabbat. You haven't done anything wrong. Just that with oven, of course, one cannot set the oven or something like that on a timer and then open it before the timer starts and put the food in, because you don't want to leave it in the oven the whole day. But those are really rare situations. But coffee is a more common problem, and a lot of people want to do that, so it is not a problem to use it with a timer. Finally, going back to the halachot of activities that start before Shabbat and continue into Shabbat, the most common things that we have in a regular household is kitchen appliances and washing, or a washer or a dryer. So one is allowed to start a washing cycle before Shabbat, even if it will continue into Shabbat, but have to be careful not to open the machine if the light turns on. If there is an urgent need to have those clothes, then one is allowed to open the machine once the cycle is over, if no lights are being turned on and off, and put those clothes on a rack inside the house. We'll talk about it later when we get to Marit Ayin. Again, this is not a very common situation. Thank God today people have enough clothes, but it's more common in Israel. Not every household has a dryer. Not everybody could afford clothes for the whole family. Sometimes you'll have a situation like that. Or the question that was actually discussed by Haim Ovadia Yosef was of a soldier that comes home right before Shabbat and has to leave immediately after Shabbat, and he has only that set of uniform. There's no other set. So he's allowed to do that, to throw them into the machine before Shabbat, take them out, let them dry, and use them after Shabbat when he goes back to the base. The same thing with the dryer. It's even easier. The dryer, you put in a cycle before Shabbat, and it goes on automatically. One can open it later on and take what's needed again, given there are no lights involved. And same thing goes for the dishwasher. So to sum up, we said that on Friday, one has to get ready for Shabbat. We do not engage in works of craftsmanship, carpentry, construction, etc., unless it's necessary. But commerce and traveling and opening a store, all these things are okay Friday afternoon. Of course, we always have the time to get home on time and be ready for Shabbat. We said also that one is allowed to use a timer for any activity on Shabbat as long as he sets it before Shabbat. Tomorrow we'll talk more about a timer and the question whether one could change the setting of a timer if it's a physical timer after Shabbat has started, when it's in on and off position, and we'll continue to discuss the halachot of shehiyah v'atmana, meaning leaving food on the hot plate before Shabbat, removing it and putting it back during Shabbat. So tomorrow, same time, 7 Eastern Standard Time. Looking forward to see everyone. Have a great day.